And I would argue that maybe the fact that we haven't had any complaints come forward with any specificity arguing that their privacy has been violated clearly indicates, in 10 years, clearly indicates that something must be doing right. Somebody must be doing something exactly right.
But who would be complaining?
Somebody whose privacy was violated. You can't have your privacy if you don't know your privacy is violated, right? Can you?
I disagree with that. I mean, I think if the tree falls in the forest, it makes a noise whether you're there to see it or not.
Google is not hiding this one. They're looking at your supposedly private emails and not concerned one bit about sending on what they find to officials. They're looking for child predators, an admirable effort indeed. However, there needs to be some pause here and some real concern as those privacies we so cherish are once again being nibbled away for what some believe is a just cause. Let's welcome to MidPoint, New York Times bestselling author of The Entrepreneur Nation, a self-described recovering investment banker. She also wants to make sure we tell you she's a huge NFL fan. And a CNBC contributor as well, Carol Roth, joins us on MidPoint. Carol, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Ed.
I'm not even going to get to the Bears. Maybe I'll get to that in a little bit because seeing as you're in Chicago, we have to be very careful. Let's go ahead and start out with Google. Google says they are now looking for child pornography. And here's the story. A Houston detective says he couldn't see the child porn stored on a registered sex offender's Gmail account. Google could. And now the accused is facing justice because Google said, here's what we saw. I got to tell you, there are some people out there who are trying to protect kids and looking for criminals who would say, outstanding. Big applause to Google, right?
Absolutely. I think that we have to take a step back, though, and realize that the luxury of the future is going to be privacy, because there really should not be any current expectation that we have any. Now, in this particular case, does the means justify the ends? It's very hard to justify that somebody shouldn't be putting away a child pornographer. But I think the bigger picture issue here is that Google has so much data, but the reality is people are giving up their own privacy rights. And that's the big issue. Google discloses that they are going through your email to find out if you like peanut butter so they can display that ad. And in the case of the child pornographers, they're going to send that information on to the government. But at the end of the day, you as a user of Gmail or all the various technologies that Google has out there have in fact consented to this.
Is it not fair to say, though, that in many ways, and you're right, I think you said it very well, the luxury of the future is going to be your privacy. And I kidded about this with someone in an earlier interview. The people who always say, what, you mean what I said on Facebook wasn't private because I marked it private for only my private friends? So we already know what some people are thinking. But are we sacrificing our privacy when we break the law? I think that's going to be the next thing here. If you're found doing that, should the authorities not at least be able to look and try and find you?
Well, there's a very simple way to fix this. You have a disclosure policy that says that as Google, we are going to be looking through your email for these specific things, for child pornography, for these certain terms, and if we find that, we turn that over. However, everything else we would set aside and keep private. There is a middle ground there. However, that's against Google's entire business model. They want to comb your email and your data to find out as much information as possible because that's frankly how they make money. And it's starting with email and their Gmail accounts now, but if you think about Google's overall business model, they have the Android platform on your phone, so that could encompass your apps and your text messages. They have bought Nest, which collects data in your house. Right now they're saying that they're not doing all of those things, but certainly they will have access to more and more touch points. And I think that you as a consumer, that's where you need to be concerned and make the choices that are appropriate and make sure that you're actually reading those terms and conditions that you're agreeing to.
Isn't that probably the biggest thing here? You just touched on it. There was actually a South Park episode that made an awful lot of fun about that, and certain people have as well.
I was going to reference that. I love that episode.
Where certainly what happened in the episode is not for a family audience, but they pretty much hit it very well. Nobody ever reads all of these things that are sitting there. Here's what you do. Here's what you're going to do. But if you read, is it not fair to say that a lot of this is in there in the first place?
It absolutely is in there, and there is a trade-off, I think, for people who want to have access to a lot of these tools for free or at a very discount price. But if you think about it, if you took this offline, this would never happen. You would never give a journal company the opportunity to come in and read your diary just for giving you the journal for free. But for some reason, when we migrate this stuff online, because it's so omnipresent, people don't want to read these terms and conditions, and they're everywhere. And hey, I'm getting this for free now at a really low price. There is this trade-off. And I think as more and more people become aware of these policies, what they actually say, what they're giving up, and some of the repercussions and backlash from it, I would imagine that there are going to be more and more companies that come with business models that protect your privacy, and you have to pay for that little bit of privacy.
All right, let's trade from going to talking about Google to talking about tax inversions, which is now all of a sudden the rage on Wall Street and everybody else. It seems to be a lot of people are saying tax inversions, ooh, mystical, magical words. English then, from somebody who knows, what exactly is a tax inversion?
So a tax inversion is a financial strategy where a company, let's say from the U.S., merges with a foreign company and decides to, quote unquote, relocate their headquarters to that foreign company's home country in order to be able to avoid paying taxes as a company that is domiciled in the United States. And it was brought about because basically the United States doesn't have a very competitive tax code to begin with. And so they wanted to make sure the companies that were based in different places were able to compete, and the companies in the U.S. were able to compete with those companies abroad. However, as our tax policy and our tax code has not been addressed, even though everybody seems to agree on both sides of the aisle that it's a gigantic mess and needs to be addressed, more and more companies are being pushed by their shareholders and by shareholder activists to consider this inversion tactic or strategy, if you will, in order to pay less taxes.
Is this now something, and I'm going to point specifically to Walgreens recently, who is near a deal. It's a company called Alliance Boots, a British pharmacy retailer company. They're near the deal to take over them, but they're going to do so without moving their corporate headquarters abroad. They're going to stay right here. It almost seems as if we're fighting this. We want to remain patriotic. We want to put out that wonderful marketing ploy that's going to help us make more money. But also maybe there's on the other side companies who are afraid that President Obama is going to put that executive action pen to work sooner or later and really crack down on U.S. companies.
Right. There are actually 3 Democratic senators led by Dick Durbin here in Illinois who have been pressuring the president to take some sort of executive order to block these tax inversions. And again, I think that we're trying to address the symptom rather than the problem. The problem is that we have an arcane tax code that is not competitive for businesses here in the United States on a global scale. Our companies that are based in the United States have $2 trillion based overseas that they're not bringing back and reinvesting into the United States because they don't want to be taxed on it. The United States is the only major country in the world that taxes your profits if you earn them overseas. Both overseas, that entity taxes it, and then they're taxed back here at home again. It doesn't happen anywhere else, and it's not doesn't make us our companies competitive. And we have all this money from our companies that are abroad. It makes absolutely no sense. And in a time when we're trying to create jobs, a really good incentive would be, hey, let's get this cash back here in the United States and put it to work hiring people.
Do you get the feeling, though, that companies are running a little scared right now because executive order seems to be that order of the day right now and the way people are after them right now to stay here?
You know, I think it depends on the company. A company like Walgreens, who announced this morning that they're not planning to do this, at least yet, you know, I think is a consumer-facing company and is going to be a little bit more fearful of the backlash than perhaps a company that sells to other businesses and doesn't have that sort of consumer perception. But that being said, at the end of the day, the corporate's board of directors, any corporation's board of directors is going to look at what's best for the shareholders. And so there may be a little bit of a timing issue here, but I don't think that the issue is going to go away anytime soon until the tax code is addressed by Congress. And
the tax code being addressed by Congress, is it fair to say that we may have to wait until the Chicago Bears win their next 10 championships before that will completely happen?
I'll say until the Cubs win. let's
Oh, now
put
it's
that
over.
one on the table. They haven't won in over 100 years, right?
Over. That's it. No tax code ever if you're going to go that far. By the way, about the 20 seconds we have left, changing passwords now. They're stealing them by the billions overseas. This has got to be driving companies nuts now because they have consumers now who have got to go in and change passwords, and they could have their information stolen there.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there has to be some expectation that if you're putting any sort of information online, whether it's your password, whether it's your credit card, that somebody's going to get access to it at some point. So you have to be really careful. And, you know, this is going to end up costing our economy a lot of money to deal with all of this cyber theft that's going on. It's going to be a real problem going forward.
All right, Carol, I promise that when the Blackhawks meet the Bruins again in the Stanley Cup playoffs, you and I are going to talk when it comes down to that.
Love it.
All right. Carol, thanks so much for joining us. I promise we'll do it again. Take care.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
All right. Later on this hour, On Point brings you in mere minutes what we have covered in the fastest 3 hours of news. And car coach Lauren Fix is here to bring some light to those who feel so safe in those oh-so-little cars. MidPoint, where we question everything.